What's up, Packers fans, and welcome back to another episode of the Daily Draft, brought to you by Badger State Brewing in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Today, we are talking cornerbacks, a key need for the Packers with Eric Stokes' injury situation kind of being up in the air, Keyshawn Nixon being a free agent, Jair Alexander not being able to stay healthy. It's something that Green Bay needs to look into. And I love Carrington Valentine. I think he's, already returned amazing value for a seventh round pick. I also don't know that you're making long-term decisions for your franchise based on Carrington Valentine. Okay. I don't know that you wouldn't go grab a corner just because, you feel like you might have something in Valentine. Be much more excited about kind of throwing him into a competition, even if you think he's really a third or a fourth round talent instead of in the seventh where they got him. And he's producing like a third or a fourth round talent. I'm not making long-term decisions based on Carrington Valentine. One of the reasons I bring up Carrington Valentine is he has excellent length. Just like the topic of today's show, Iowa State cornerback TJ Tampa. It's the number one thing that you'll notice. Tampa has that length, and especially if you're going to be trying to play some cover three, trying to play some cover one, trying to press man, he's thick. He's long and he's thick. 6'1", 198. Honestly, he looks like a safety. Okay, I think probably tried to thin out a little bit for testing purposes. I think he played over 200 pounds at TJ, or excuse me, at Iowa State, or at least he sure looked. I mean, to me, he looks like a safety. Okay, that's one of the things I wrote in my notes. He looks like a safety to me who plays corner. That doesn't mean like he moves like a safety, because he doesn't, but he looks to me like a safety playing cornerback, and I only mean that as a compliment. Like, he is a thick dude. He's a well built guy, but also, I mean, when he lines up against these Big 12 wide receivers, he's a large man, right? He's not necessarily lining up against the guys that are 6'4", 6'5", and looking big, but a lot of these guys at Texas, like Worthy, a lot of the guys at Kansas State, and he's long. Okay, that's what I'll go with that. I think he play man. I think he can play press man. I think he sinks his hips well, and can get in kind of that trail position in man. And trail doesn't mean you get beat; it just means you're in the spot and where you're supposed to be. And I think that happens without wasted movement, which is a key for me. When you kind of transition from, okay, I'm pressing, and now I'm flipping my hips, and I'm going with you. Now I got my back to the quarterback instead of my eyes on the quarterback, like in zone. He makes that transition well, and not a lot of chopping, not a lot of slipping. I think he's pretty darn good at that. 167, and I hope people have a little bit of perspective for what this number means. But 167 of his 411 snaps at cornerback this year in coverage were press, and that's a high. A lot of second long, third and long. A lot of zone calls. Like, there are just times that your coordinator doesn't want you to press. TJ Tampa pressing for almost half. 167 isn't quite half of 411, but I mean, it's a high percentage, right, of times that he went up there and played press. And if that's something that you want these Green Bay corners to be able to do, and I don't mean you, the fan, like, I know fans love press coverage, but I really mean like you, Jeff Hafley, you, Ryan Downard, the new Packers defensive coaching regime. If they're looking for a press man guy, I think TJ Tampa is definitely on the list, right? He's an explosive athlete on film in a linear way. And I mean that, like, his acceleration, his start-stop is super impressive. From just a number perspective, I'm very impressed with a 54.8 passer rating against. And how does that happen? Well, you only allow 51% of the balls thrown your way to be completed, and then you pick off 2 of them. Okay, that's a big one, and you're not allowing a ton of yardage. I mean, Tampa got targeted 49 times and only gave up 240 yards. So very much a lockdown type of guy as opposed to a gambling type of guy. Just depends on you're looking for ball production, or are you looking to take away the other team's best option, or are you looking to take away the other team's second best option? Are you looking for your corners to consistently be where they're supposed to be, or are you looking for your corners to get their hands on the football? There's not necessarily one way of doing it that's better, but I tend to, and I've talked about this before when talking about other defensive backs, I tend to value the ability to take away someone's, be where you're supposed to be, force incompletions, and attempt to take away other teams' top options. I think, the gambling types, the guys that get their hand on the ball, they're great. It's fun to have them at safety. At corner, though, what the Packers did to the Cowboys is kind of what happens to gambling corners when things go bad. You saw Gilmore and Bland specifically get his hands on a ton of balls, and then when he didn't, he was cooked. And Trayvon Diggs is the exact same way for Dallas. Like if he doesn't get his hand on the ball, he gets cooked. And that's definitely not the kind of player that TJ Tampa is. Decent ball production. I'm not going to say great. 16 passes batted down in the last 2 years, a forced fumble and 3 picks. Not necessarily on the level of, like some corners, the ones that are really good, but it's good enough for a guy that we're sort of classifying in this press man shutdown role as opposed to um, super playmaker ball production type role. That ball production is sort of adequate. I mentioned the length. I mentioned being able to play a deep third in cover 3. I mentioned being able to not necessarily get beat over the top in cover 1. He doesn't really get beat deep. In the last 3 years, he spent 926 snaps in coverage. 19 balls went for 15 or more yards. 19. So that's an extremely low percentage when you think about how often this kid was on the field for Iowa State. And by the way, Big 12 is a passing league, folks. That ball is going up. Okay. And so for him to only, allow 19 big plays over 15 yards in 3 years as a starter, that's impressive to me. And something that I definitely noted. He's I think a player that tracks the ball well, high points it well, doesn't always catch it super well, but he uses his length. And to me, like that screams cover 3, right? You're talking about like the Richard Sherman archetype, and he's certainly not the height of a Richard Sherman. I don't even think he has the arm length of a Richard Sherman, but when I watch him, I'm thinking, boy, he could play some cover 3 and he could play press man. I just think like if he's your second best, if he kind of reaches his 60th or 70th percentile outcome, so not like, if everything goes perfectly for him, but if he just has a good development track in the NFL, I think he'd be a great number 2 corner. And I think that has more value than people might think. You think like, all right, I'm going to burn a second round pick on TJ Tampa. I kind of hope he can be a number 1 corner. I don't care. If you can be a very, very good number 2 when you have a guy like Jair Alexander, I'm for that, especially to the way, and we'll talk about this in the fit, the way he would kind of fit in with the secondary, I think is interesting. He's a big physical corner. As I mentioned, he's almost a safety size. He's a plus in the run game, my opinion. I don't watch a ton of run snaps because it's not the, I shouldn't say I watch the whole game, but I don't focus in a ton on the rundowns just because that is not what corners get paid for in the NFL. Even cover 2 corners aren't getting paid for that. Like it's appreciated, right, when it's done well. If you have a cornerback, especially a nickel, I don't think Tampa's a nickel at all, but especially if you have a nickel who can tackle, who can really fill against the run, that's a big deal. But Tampa's a plus, I think, and he's an experienced player for a guy. Who has played as much as he has. He's got 30 starts and he's only 21 as of this video right now. So that's something. And again, they've seen every passing concept in the world, dealing with some of the air raid stuff and some of the pro style stuff that goes through the Big 12 for sure. He really struggled down the stretch. We're going to get into some of the cons or some of the things that, would be concerns, or why is TJ Tampa not, a top 10 pick? Well, here are some of the things that I'd like to see improve, or concerns that I see on his tape and potentially with his athletic profile. He really struggled down the stretch in 2023. I thought his last 3 games might have been like the 3 worst games of the last 2 years. I didn't watch anything so far of his from 3 seasons ago, like so 2021. But in 2022 and 2023, when I got kind of through it, like, man, he just tailed off. And it's not like their season was over, right? They weren't in the Big 12 championship discussion, but I don't know if he got hurt, got nicked. I'd like to see an explanation. And I don't think I'm not going to the combine, and I don't think anybody's gonna be like, hey, you really stunk during the last month. What happened? I'd like to know what happened. He plays high, which he's tall, but you like to get guys to kind of, get low in their back pedal, or consistently be kind of technically sound. And for a guy that's already tall and already, a concern, like I think That 5'11" to 5'11 and a half to me is the prototype size for a corner. Eric Crocker has talked a lot about this, how tough it is, really truly difficult it is to be a great corner at 6'1", 6'2". And it's just the special ones that can make it work. Everyone thinks like, oh, the prototype size for a corner is 6'1". It's not. The guy's just, it's very difficult to move the way that a cornerback needs to move when you're that tall. And so when you're that tall and you already kind of play high, I'm really interested to see if it's just kind of a bad habit and it can be overcome. And what I want to see there is change of direction. Testing at the NFL Combine, I'm interested to see, what he's going to run in the short shuttle, what he's going to run in the 3-cone drill. The 40 will be important. I mean, I think any corner kind of has to check a box, if you will. I think any corner has to have a certain level of top end speed, just especially if they're going to play a deep third, right? You have to have some level of speed to play cornerback unless you're just going to a strict cover 2 team. And got to tell you, there are not a ton of teams anymore that run Tampa 2 as like their base, or are just constantly running a really clean version of Tampa 2. And Green Bay certainly won't be one of those teams under Jeff Hafley, right? So you got to have some long speed, but I'm more interested in TJ Tampa's change of direction. That's the more important thing to me. He does get caught with his hand in the cookie jar occasionally. I mentioned him as more of a shutdown guy than a gamble guy. He does do a little bit of gambling. I mean that from more of like, if he is what he can be, I think he can be more of a take your guy away than a big ball production guy. He kind of thinks he's a ball production guy. And then you look at the box score and it's like, maybe you're not. I mentioned doesn't get beat deep, doesn't get beat deep a ton. When he has, I kind of went in and looked at a cut of his explosives given up. A lot of it is when he's trying to go get the ball. A lot of it is not like not getting beat deep, not losing a jump ball, like he doesn't get mossed, right? But if he goes for a pick or he takes a bad angle, that is when he gets beat deep. And some of just that eye discipline stuff, I'd like to see improved. And I think potentially could be more of a problem in the NFL than it was in college. The gambling kind of aspects of his game. Again, not a huge red flag, but something that I noted and something that I set down. The big one for me is like, can he turn, right? Is he loose enough in the hips to play man, or is he just going to be a deep third or cover 4 corner? And one of those is much more valuable than the other. Okay, if he's a really good zone corner, if he's somebody that can play that linear football, right, and start and stop and have that straight line acceleration, that straight line top speed, that ability to high point the football, be able to run fast enough at 6'1" to not get beat deep, like that has value. But if he has the wiggle in his hips to play man coverage and pass off route concepts and be able to drive on stuff and change direction, I think that really honestly probably moves him in more of a round 1 grade. But I need to be able to see that because it's not on tape, right? And so some elite change of direction stuff at the combine would move me closer to round 1 with TJ Tampa. I don't know that it would get him all the way there just because there are some guys that do really well in the underwear Olympics, if you will, and that it just never translates. To me, that's my big question. Change of direction. How fluid is he? Right now, I see explosive. I see long. I see aggressive. I see a good football player who's going to get a decent grade from me, but I don't see that fluidity that a player like a Jair Alexander has. Okay, Packers fit. Watch for the testing. They really like long corners. Okay, that is something that they appreciate. Valentine has decent length. I know Jair doesn't, but you go back to like their infatuation with Ladarius Gunter. Obviously, they spent a lot of money on a lot of draft capital on Kevin King. I think even Eric Stokes is a reasonably big guy. He's 6 foot tall, another 6 foot tall corner. Looks like he's even closer to 6'1". They like 6'1". So they like long corners. That's a thing. That's I think Jair Alexander probably had some explosive numbers that they were super excited about. Jair Alexander obviously had some change of direction stuff that they were super excited about, and they nailed the Jair Alexander pick. They whiffed on Josh Jackson and Kevin King. I mean, 6 feet tall. Like, they like these longer corners, and certainly if Jeff Hafley is going to play cover 3, cover 1, the guys with size, especially if they're going to project them outside and not into a nickel roll, it's going to be something. But I'm going to be paying attention. As far as the Packers specific thresholds, what they like to see, what you guys should be watching for from TJ Tampa at the NFL Combine, 5'10" and 7/8. That's their for outside corner, but honestly, basically for corner guys that they've drafted, 5'10" and 7/8. He's that. Okay, he's tall. He's 6'1". He's not even close to that 5'10" and 7/8 number. He's got to run the 40 and better than 4.6, and I would just say it needs to happen either way. If he was 6'4", he could run slower. 6'4" with his movement skills, but he's 6'1". He's got to be able to run better than 4.6. And then they want that 3-cone time to be under 7 seconds, and that's the change of direction stuff that I'm talking about. And so that would make him, if he can run, because everything else is already there. And I think if he could run a 4.4 something or a low 4.5s 40 and break that 7-second time in the 3-cone, he might be a pretty tier one Packer as far as a fit perspective. Outside corner opposite Jair, I don't see TJ Tampa as a nickel at all. If you're talking specifically about his fit, I think he's in a competition immediately with Eric Stokes and Carrington Valentine. I don't think for a minute he could play nickel. I might check him out at safety, just depending on what I see. I would maybe look at him at safety. I think he could be a really good deep thirds corner if Hafley wants to play a tunnel single high. I think TJ Tampa could be a really good fit in round 2 if they address, offensive line or pass rush, or, pick my guy Keon Coleman at 41. If they do some other stuff, like if it's Nubin and Fautanu or Kinchins and Chris Jenkins, go to the defensive line, any type of that thing. That pick 58, I think TJ Tampa could be awesome for them. I think he'd have to really beat up Valentines and Stokes in camp unless they think he can play a little safety, and that's sort of his team fit. Okay, overall grade for TJ Tampa. He's got a solid round 2 for me. Right in the middle of round 2 is where I have him graded. Player 54 overall for me. I think good change of direction testing could push him up into the late 30s. I don't know that I'm ever going to go with a round 1 grade just based on film, no matter what. I mentioned kind of, and people get on me, and I do get some of the criticism. I understand it, right? People get on me about athletic testing and how much I value it. It's a lot of the times it breaks some ties, it answers some questions, and it checks some boxes. And then there are situations like with Elijah Holyfield, right? We're running back out of Georgia. A lot of people had him in the top 50, then top 100. And he had just such a terrible combine that it was like, okay, he's probably not an NFL athlete. No, he's not in the NFL. And I'm not saying that's going to happen to TJ Tampa. I'm just saying there are things that can happen to you where when you go from the college to the pro level, from a strictly athletic standpoint, if you're just not an NFL athlete, you're just not an NFL athlete. Not a concern with TJ Tampa, but he's going to have some variance for me based on what happens in Indianapolis. Not necessarily so much because of the long speed, but really more the change of direction. I want to see how much wiggle he has. I want to see, his short area quickness and if he can kind of slide up my rankings at all. Speaking of my rankings and speaking of what we're doing here, the Green Bay Draft Guide, brought to you by Packer Report, is the top, in my opinion, Packers specific draft guide out there. I work on that thing. Jacob Westendorf works on that thing. Jacob Morley works on that thing. He does a great job with Packer people. I've got it right here when I'm talking about thresholds, athletic points that the Packers prefer. As I mentioned with corner, they prefer you to be over 5'10" and 7/8. They prefer you to run under a 4.6 40, and they prefer you to run under a 7-second 3-cone. That is based on 20 years of research, kind of even more at some points, because Ron Wolf taught Ted Thompson, who taught Brian Gutekunst. Okay. And this is very, very, like, I'll give you just as an example why you should listen to this, and we'll go. Here are your tier one Packer fits. So at wide receiver, I'm just giving this as an example for the guide purpose. At wide receiver, the Packers like you to be 5'11 or more, 195 or more, run a 4.57 40 or quicker, a 7.08 three-corner quicker, a 10-foot broad or more, and they really like productive wide receivers, as in having a 1,000-yard college season. The five players that hit that number for the Packers in last year's draft: JSN, Rashee Rice, by the way, two pretty good players, especially Rice, Dontavion Wicks, A.T. Perry, and Grant DuBose. 5 players. So of the 5 tier 1 Packers fits, Green Bay took 2 of them. That's the type of insight that you can get with the Green Bay draft guide powered by Packer Report, is narrowing you in on guys that might be Green Bay Packers and having you watch the draft as an educated fan, which is our goal, right? We want you to be in on the action and feel like you know what you're talking about, because there's nothing cooler than being at the bar with your buddies and knowing what the hell you're talking about. All right. Green Bay Draft Guide powered by Packer Report. Link in the description, whether you're on podcast, whether you're on video. Promo code for 10% off. Daily, as in DAILY, Daily Draft. Go check out Packer Report. We've got awesome stuff going on there every day. Mark Eckel has a really, really cool series going on in the offseason where he talks to an NFL employee about the Packers roster. We got so much cool stuff going on. And as always, guys, like and subscribe. Do everything you need to do here at the Pack-A-Day Podcast channel. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day, and go Pack Go.